I built a huge Egyptian temple with Lego bricks, and I displayed it at Brickvention 2024. Let's take a deep dive look into how this is built, and I'll break down some of the techniques that I used and share with you some of the inspiration behind the build. I'll also showcase how I packed this thing and transported it from Perth all the way to Melbourne. Let's dive in. So this is the Temple of Anubis, a MOC that's set in the wonderful world of LEGO Adventurers. One of the best LEGO themes. The basic story that I was going for with this MOC is that Baron von Baron, Sam Sinister, and Signor Palma have heard tell of a purple crystal that is said to grant those who hold it the power over life and death. Now they've tracked this crystal down to a temple in Egypt, where they hope to steal it and use its powers for evil. But upon arriving at this temple, some members of the cult of Anubis wish to use this crystal to resurrect Anubis, which would spell death and destruction for all. And as you can see, they've already begun the ritual that will bring back Anubis. Using the life essence from this mummy and combining it with the power of the crystal are just the first steps that they need to bring Anubis back. But worry not, for Johnny Thunder, Dr. Kilroy, and Pippin Reed are here to put a stop to both of these evil plans and ensure that the purple crystal is kept out of the hands of those that would use it for evil. So that's the basic story, but the inspiration for this MOC, it came from some pictures here that I found online. I'll have a link in the description below to the original source for those images. Now, I saw this cool pyramid-style building, and I also saw this interesting octagonal shrine. I love the aesthetic and the vibe of both of these images, so I decided to just combine these two images. I took the front entrance from this pyramid image, and then I combined it with the octagonal shape of this other image. So as I began work on this, pretty early on I knew I wanted to make some kind of fun landscape choice. In the past when I'd built desert landscapes, I'd just do a fairly stock standard design using a very plate heavy look, very similar to these images here. And hey, it looks great, but I don't know, I wanted to challenge myself and do something a little bit different. So I went with a look here that was almost exclusively using curved slope pieces, and every now and then I'd scatter in a few plates and tiles as well, and yeah, it was incredibly fun to go with something a little bit different here. And I think the textures here really mimic the look of sand, plus combining it with these different desert plants, I was super happy with how this looked. It was also fun to include, sand in other places on this temple, like seeing it covering areas of these steps here, or seeing it all over this upper floor area. There were moments when I was building this that I wasn't sure if I was adding a little too much sand to the temple itself, but sand. It's coarse, rough, irritating, and it gets everywhere. So it just kind of made sense to have it all over the place. Now, one issue I ran into early on in the build process was I really wanted to use some of these brilliant printed Egyptian pieces that appeared in some of the older Adventurer sets. Now, these pieces are so pretty and they look great, but most of them appear in tan. And I decided pretty early on that the color scheme of this was going to be that the sand was tan and the temple itself was dark tan. And I didn't really want any crossover because that would be kind of weird, right? So yeah, it didn't really make sense for me to use those pieces, unfortunately. But I did find a solution. These hieroglyph pieces here, they have a tan edge around them. Well, if I just cover that bit up, you'll barely be able to see any of the tan. And as a result, I can better integrate them into the final dark tan design. So hey, crisis averted. But sadly, it meant I couldn't use some of these other incredible printed pieces, which was a shame because they're so pretty. But next time. So if you're curious, from my rough estimates, I have no idea how many pieces are in this, but I roughly can calculate the amount of 1x2 dark tan tiles that I used. I believe it's 2,500. I had to order a good amount of these, so that's how I can get that maths there, but I used a good amount of them for the brickwork on the side here, as well as to create the tiling on the roof here, and also the tiling on the floor down here. Oh, actually there's some up top as well. Actually, while we're up top here, let's talk about this large broken ring. So this was adapted from the original source material, the original inspiration there. And here's a peek at how this curve is achieved. So I built these smaller rectangular sections and then linked them with these hinge plates in dark bluish grey. I then used snot bricks to attach some of these cheese slopes to cover up that little gap that's just in between the individual sections. And then there's some additional support here that's created by the help of some of these smaller flex tube elements, and as a result this curve is very sturdy and just won't fall apart. I also used a similar cheese slope design to cover up some of the gaps on the sides of the temple. You can see some used here to help bridge the plate-heavy brickwork into the snotted, tiled brick design here. Oh, and here's how I attach these tiles at this angle. I built a snot structure that allowed for these plates with bars on them to stick out. From here, I then used some of my favorite snot pieces and attached some clips on either side, and they just very nicely lock into those bars, and then I just place the plate onto that snot brick, and there you go, it's at a nice angle. Easy enough. I'll break down one other design for you now, this angled edge on the front platform here. A lot of people at Brickvention said they love this design, so if you want to build it at home, here's how you can do so. So it's using some of these 1x2 hinge bricks, and thanks to those, you can angle these 2x4 plates. If you place some cheese just under it here, it also allows there to be basically no gap at all. So this design is the same thing basically the whole way around. But when they meet in the middle, you change up the tiles that are on that 2x4 plate and you end it with one of these wedge plates. Then in the middle between these two wedge plates, we use a snot brick and then this trans-clear angled hollow stud piece. This one here specifically. It comes in a lot of collectible minifigures recently so that you can pose them at an angle. It's a really nice piece. So the angle of this allows you to then place a tile on top of it and then you get this perfect nice little edge. I was very happy with how this turned out. So that's a rundown of this MOC. If you're curious how I transported it from Perth to Melbourne, which by the way is about the same distance as LA to New York, well, here's some behind the scenes images that show you how. This MOC splits up into different sections. It's on 4 32x32 base plates, and sometimes one of the top sections will split off to make transportation just that little bit easier. I then used cling wrap to wrap each individual section, and yeah, this adds a nice layer of padding, but it also helps everything stay together. You know, if pieces do break off, they'll stay with that same substructure, and I won't end up with these random pieces at the bottom of my suitcase not knowing where the heck they go. So after that, I placed these substructures in my suitcase, like you can see here. Now, I didn't get a photo of it, but I then fill in all the gaps around these substructures with bubble wrap, and I pad everything as much as possible. That way, nothing is moving, and everything is heavily protected. I then take the filled up suitcase on the flight, and it ends up in Melbourne, and hey, this year, nothing broke whatsoever. The packing went very smoothly. Now, the biggest thing of note here about packing Lego for trips is that you don't want anything to move around too much and potentially hit other things. When things bump into each other, or they have room to butt up against something, that's when they're most likely to get damaged, that's when they're most likely to break, or you might have elements get knocked off. As you can see in these images here, there's always a healthy amount of space between each section. Yes, in these images, some of these sections are touching, but I didn't take a picture of it, but I did put padding in between them there, and it worked perfectly. So lots and lots of bubble wrap is super important. So yeah, that's the basics of how I transported this to the convention. Hopefully you enjoyed this look into the process, the packing, and the techniques used in this build. Stay tuned for more videos like this coming very soon. Thanks so much guys, happy building, and bye for now.